What's up, Pooj crew? Thank you for being here for episode 136 of the Poojie podcast. Excited for today's episode. Got some friends back on the podcast. Schedules finally aligned, so we were able to get together. Not going to see all the familiar faces, but at least a few. And happy to have them here, of course, to go over week 2 of the NFL, specifically Jaguars, Colts. As you can see, rocking that Jags logo proudly this week following that game in week 2 against the Colts. And going to look ahead to the Chargers game coming up this Sunday at 4:05. So let's welcome in the guys. Jacob, we got Kit Kat and Matt here, Maynard Swag 23. Gentlemen, how are we both doing today?
Oh, we're doing great. I mean, anytime the Jags win, it's a great time. But for the Jags to just completely dominate our division rival, I mean, it almost goes without saying at this point with the Colts coming to town all these years and never winning. But it feels good to be in the W column and be the only team in the division in the W column, so I can't complain.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Jags fan. I support you guys. That just football's being back, knowing that my baseball season is just about wrapping up. Last week, this week, going back to Jags games, it was a lot of fun. I was very surprised at the outcome, but it was a lot of fun. It's probably the most fun I've had at a Jags game in a long time.
Hell of a time. I mean, honestly, most fun since I guess we beat the Bills 9-6 last season. That was kind of fun, but it was a really boring game. And then best game since then was probably the Patriots game in 2018. I think it was week 2. And sit down. All the Patriots fans getting mad at how excited the Jags fans were. But yeah, no, fantastic environment. If you were at the bank on Sunday, we could feel you there. I mean, we were there and we felt the atmosphere rocking, and you can tell this city is just so excited about this team and ready to support this team. And Jacob, you mentioned the streak, and I talked about it in the last episode against the Colts. It was 7 in a row. Now it's 8 in a row. They have not beaten us since 2014 in Jacksonville. And as a Jags fan, I'm always hesitant to circle a game on a calendar or on a schedule as a guaranteed win. But it almost feels like we're getting to that point with the Colts coming to Jacksonville.
What's funny is, as a Jags fan, between all the actual diehard Jags fans, it's pretty common for us not to assume we're going to win until we, start doing it. And it's almost like if you're a Colts fan at this point, maybe you should do the same coming to Jacksonville. If I were a Colts fan, I would not show up to a Jags home game until you guys start winning here, because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for heartbreak. And to lose to your division rival, but to lose to a Jags team that hasn't done much in the last decade or two, it's got to be pretty tough. Even when you're successful and about sniffing the door of the playoffs and you lose to us, I mean, we're going to talk our stuff. So I would do the same if I were a Colts fan.
Matt, I have a question for you because we all know you're a Ravens fan. Do the Ravens have a team that's like that where it's almost like the feeling going into the game, like they have your number or you have their number as a Ravens fan?
I mean, growing up, it was always Cleveland. With how bad Cleveland was, I just knew when I was going to – either if you're going there or if they're coming to Baltimore, it was almost a guaranteed. The other way around, not really can't put anybody in particular. Pittsburgh, we always split. Or even when Tom Brady was in New England, we always had their number sometimes.
Oh, yeah, I do remember. I remember that massive playoff victory. What, Jacoby Jones over the top, or was that against the Broncos? Was that against the Patriots or the Broncos?
So Jacoby Jones was the Broncos. The Hail Mary to go to overtime. The Patriots was Anquan Bolden. He had 2 in the end zone in the fourth quarter.
Hell yeah. Okay, that was it. Yeah, I remember those games always being great back when Joe Flacco was elite, but hey, he's got the Jets at 1-1, so
he's still elite.
Maybe he's still got that fire in him. He's got that dog.
He's got that dog in him.
But Jacob, you mentioned the Colts streak, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Colts. 0 points. They might as well have stayed in Indianapolis this week. They literally were as effective in Jacksonville as they would have been staying home, scoring 0 points. Jaguars put up 24, 2 touchdowns right off the bat, going into halftime 17-0, and then just controlled the second half, made it 24-0. You guys may have seen this stat. How many times have the Colts been shut out since 1994? Do you guys know?
3 times?
3 times.
Wow.
And all 3 times have come to the Jaguars in the last 5 years. I think it was 27-0, 24-0, and then 6-0 a few years ago, back in 2018, I believe it was. But so the Jaguars are building off that momentum. I mean, honestly, this was a team I was a little nervous to see early in the season just because I wasn't sure how our team was going to look with the new regime and new play calling, pretty much completely new offense, a lot of new playmakers. But on that same note, you look across the field at a Colts team that brand new quarterback. Obviously, they were missing Michael Pittman, and they were really leaning on Jonathan Taylor there. So it seemed like that equation kind of worked out well for the Jaguars this go round.
Yeah, I remember seeing Michael Pittman, being inactive, and there was like tweets about the rest of their wide receiver room going into this game, and I'm like, I don't know a single person on this wide receiver depth chart. And so I'm like, that's going to be a good point for us, like being able to go against this team early and not have too many weapons. But I was, assuming Jonathan Taylor was going to be a workhorse and he was really going to like help lead them. We've had trouble with him before. He's been a great back. They kind of lived by him last year along with their defense. And so for us to kind of hold him in check, it could be a product of not having anyone to really worry about on the passing game. Matt Ryan's not nearly as mobile as most quarterbacks. With no big weapons in the receiving game, we could have probably just sold out easy to Jonathan Taylor, stop the run, and then let Matt Ryan do his thing, and that was throw interceptions to us. So I did not expect it to be nearly as dominant as it did, but I did know it was a really good point, them missing out on some of their star players like Darius Leonard as well on defense.
Yeah, and we could have another good matchup based on injuries coming up this week, which we'll get to. But Michael Pittman put up over 100 yards week 1 against the Texans in a tie game. But Jonathan Taylor, 160-plus yards on 31 carries this week against Jacksonville, 54 yards on 9 carries. I mean, when a star running back like Jonathan Taylor gets 9 carries, that is a team just conceding the ball game. Like, you're just giving up on the run. Like, there's no other way about it. You're only running Jonathan Taylor 9 times. And obviously they were down 7-0 and then 14-0 early, but they proved in week 1 that they weren't going to go away from the run. They ran him 31 times in that game against Houston. I don't know if there was something up. I don't think there was. I haven't heard anything. I just think they abandoned the run.
And Jonathan Taylor is no slouch when it comes to the passing game. I don't know off the top of my head, but I don't really remember seeing him used too often, like maybe catching passes out of the backfield. So you would think that you would just want to get the ball to your star player, and really your only star player. And so for us to shut him down, I know, Foley, Fatukasi, he's been a good defender on the run. I think Trayvon Walker, we hope for him to have a great pass rushing presence, but I think he's actually been a very solid run defense presence. Roy Robertson Harris is a big dude. And so I'm hoping that we see that going forward, this kind of run defense is not like a fluke. I want to hope that we can go against some other big running backs. Like we have Derrick Henry in the division. That's going to be a big test too. He hasn't done much yet, but we know he always gets rolling a month into the season. So I hope that everything that we see with the run defense continues, because if we can have a strong run defense, that'll only help, the passing game and the secondary later on when we're putting them into passing situations.
I think that was the focus into that game because they knew potentially Michael Pittman wasn't going to play, that they're going to have to force Matt Ryan to either throw to receivers that nobody knows about, and they're just going to have to attack Jonathan Taylor. And I think they did a good job of that. And, I mean, the first drive, Matt Ryan looked like himself, but then he makes one bad play, and it changes the game when the Jags, importantly, take some time and they go and get a touchdown. I think that just changed the momentum. And I said they just focus on trying to keep Matt Ryan contained and just focus on Jonathan Taylor, and I think that's what kind of sealed it right there.
And Matt, you mentioned it, JT targeted one time in the passing game, one reception. And I think that's in large part due to just how fast this defense seems to be playing. And Devin Lloyd has been all over the field. We'll talk about him here in a second, but he's been great. Foye Oluwakon's been great in the pass game. The team on defense is just playing so fast right now that even when they're getting, passes into the flat, the team's able to get to the ball and get to the ball carrier and make tackles in the open field. And I think week one, Antonio Gibson, I think, had like 7 catches for almost 80 yards. The team adjusted. And I think with a new regime and a new coaching staff coming in, that's what we wanted to see from week to week and even half to half. You go into the game and you see those adjustments get made. And it was apparent going into this game that they were stressing, limiting the receivers, the running backs in the receiving game. Selling out for the open field tackles and making sure to limit them in yards. But any other takeaways from you guys before we move forward?
Just kind of want to piggyback off what you said with the adjustments, because I feel like that was a big focus of mine, was the Doug Peterson effect is what I've been calling it. And that effect is essentially like how often have Jaguar teams gone off the rails? Like they get down early or they get on a bad losing streak, and instead of it somehow kind of getting back on track, it just continues to go off the rails, and it just grows and gets larger. So to see a performance against the Commanders week one and us get down early but make a comeback within the middle part of the game where we're still in the game and it's not garbage time, I think that was part of the Doug Peterson effect. Now to see our defense, or not our defense, our team, I should say, kind of struggle week one to get things going. They came back within the game, but like, how do we go from week one to week two? How do we clean things up? Do we come out struggling again at the start? No, we came out firing on both defense and offense. And so now my next test is, do we maintain that kind of momentum against a very tough team on the West Coast? I'm not necessarily saying, I think we're going to win this game, or I think we definitely can. I just want to see us show a competitive nature when it comes to playing against one of the top teams in the NFL and the AFC, because as long as we're getting these competitive games, I just think that helps lead to the future. I don't want to see us like get back off track and off the rails and just kind of let things spiral out of control.
For sure. Go for it, Matt.
No, I'm just saying, I think what he just said, having these Jags stay in games, being competitive games, I think that's just going to be key going into next week against a very good team, very good quarterback. Unsure of what his health status is right now, but I think as Jags fans right now, I think should be exciting times, and hopefully it continues, like I said, with the Doug Peterson effect. And the offense looked really good. Finally have some good receivers. Christian Kirk was unbelievable. Glad I started him in fantasy this week. Thanks to Michael Pittman being out. But so it's definitely looking forward to see what they do next week.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be fun game to watch coming up this week. And Jacob, you and I kind of discussed this off the record this past week. I guess it was last week, maybe Thursday or Friday, we were talking, and I just kind of said, like, it feels like with Doug Peterson, and it feels like with the way the offense plays and just how the team plays, it feels like this team is just very capable of staying in games, and it doesn't look like they're going to let, any holes in the boat get bigger, I guess. Like when the ship feels like it's sinking, they're going to do a good job of at least staying afloat to a certain extent. And I feel like this is a good test coming up of that, but I also feel like the changes that were made week 1 to week 2 also show that too. And I do want to point this out because this often gets forgotten. Week 1, Jaguars, 13 penalties for 90 yards. Week 3, 3 penalties for 19 yards. So they had 10 less penalties in this week 2 game against the Colts. A lot more discipline, just played extremely good football. So it was fun to watch. But Matt, you mentioned the first drive going down, taking a lot of time off the field or off the clock, scoring a touchdown. It was 15 plays. 9 minutes, 11 seconds, and 68 yards for a touchdown. They had 3 third down conversions and a 4th down conversion on that drive. And one of the third down conversions was for a touchdown. First quarter, you're not going to see a lot of coaches go for it on 4th down, and ours did, and we converted. And it was a very high percentage play call. I believe it was to Zay Jones on the 4th down, 4th and 3, I think. High percentage play call underneath. He let the receiver clear the linebacker and get to the sticks. Funny enough, we saw that same style clearing ability happen on that Christian Kirk touchdown to make it 24-0, where Trevor Lawrence just did a really good job of letting the receiver clear the defender and delivered a great ball. So time of possession in this game, 38 minutes and 15 seconds to 21 minutes and 45 seconds. Hell, almost 66% of the clock in the Jaguars' favor. Play calling went from 42 pass attempts week 1 and 15 runs by J-Rob and ETN. We got to figure out a nickname for them, some sort of nickname for that duo. But week 2, 30 passes by Trevor Lawrence, 32 runs by J-Rob and ETN combined. And then just to look at a few of the stats here, 25 of 30, 235 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks for Trevor Lawrence. That was accompanied by 3 runs for 11 yards. J-Rob, 23 rushing attempts for 64 yards and a touchdown. Christian Kirk, 6 catches on 6 targets, 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Evan Ingram, 7 catches on 8 targets for 46 yards for him on offense. So those are some of the offensive stats. And if you haven't done so already, the Jaguars just put out on YouTube the mic'd up from the week, and it was Evan Ingram, and it was so much fun to watch. And I was not prepared for how much of a leader he was going to be coming into this team. He has taken on a huge leadership role, and you can definitely tell like that veteran presence has come with him from his career now into Jacksonville.
And just with some of those stats you put out there, I really want to point out something that I liked a lot. Week 1, we obviously saw that both of our running backs, I think they both cleared 7 yards a carry each. And so it was kind of looked at as like we really need to get these running backs going in order to have success on offense. Well, we got the balance back, but really the effectiveness in terms of a yard per carry standpoint between James Robinson and Travis Etienne, they weren't too efficient. They only averaged about 2.6 yards a carry, I think. So it was kind of good in my eyes to see us still succeed on offense as well as we did, despite the run game not being hyper efficient. And that was really with a lot of passing all around. I mean, we saw, like you said, Evan Ingram led the team with 7 catches. Christian Kirk, 6 for 6, 2 touchdowns. Marvin Jones made a lot of really solid, strong plays for us, getting first downs while getting just knocked all over the place. Throwing the ball out of the backfield to both James Robinson and Travis Etienne, and even Zay Jones picked up the big 4th down. So we really spread the ball out, really used our passing game underneath to attack, good old Gus Bradley, cover 3 scheme. So I was very encouraged to see us have success on offense and it not need to be through the run game, because when the run game gets going, that's only going to help more. I'm just glad we're capable of having a good game without it.
Do you guys know what happened after the Jags scored that first touchdown defensively?
I screamed and yelled.
I was saying after the Jags scored, they forced 3 straight 3-and-outs on defense. And 2 of those times the Jags went on and scored. I think that was a huge shift into the game, that they're going to force these 3-and-outs. You guys keep scoring, and that's what kind of shifted towards the Jags winning that game.
Yeah, take advantage of those opportunities and not let them, disappear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talked about red zone efficiency last week, only 2 touchdowns on 5 red zone visits. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the Jaguars were 100% in the red zone, at least for scoring. I think they were 4 for 4 with 3 touchdowns and a field goal. I don't remember them turning over on downs. They didn't miss field goals, so I think they were 4 for 4 in the red zone this week. 3 tutters and a field goal there. So good point there, Matt, because with a defense like the Jaguars have, it looks like if they can get a 2-touchdown lead or even a 3-possession lead, going up 17-0, that's going to start to look more and more like a mountain rather than a hill to some of these offenses we're playing. But the Jags defense, got to give them props. 165 pass yards allowed, only 54 rushing yards and 3 interceptions. Started off with that Rayshon Jenkins interception on the first drive. Devin Lloyd got involved in the action late in the game. Andre Sisco had an interception as well. But the big thing here is, as a Jags fan, I think we had 9 total takeaways last season, which seems fake. That seems like a fake number. That's almost half a takeaway per game. All right, I can't. Jacob, you're muted. You're muted.
Yep, it let me know too. There was a post-game interview. I think it was post-game. I don't know if it was at practice or not. They were talking because Rayshon Jenkins had probably his best game in a Jags uniform, one of his best games of his career. I think he played really well. He mentioned that last year there was really a focus on takeaways, and it was almost like they were so hyper-focused on getting turnovers that they were pressing and not really getting the result they wanted. Where this year it's hey, play fast, play your spot, do what you got to do. Those things will come. And so they're probably playing a little bit more relaxed and not really focusing on trying to get the ball. and it's just happening. And I think that's a great way to just go about it, because at the end of the day, if you're trying, I don't know how you like try to get a turnover. Like that's your job anyway, I guess. But just play, and whatever happens, happens. But I'm hoping to see more takeaways, just more pressure. Everybody getting takeaways. I think between Devin Lloyd, Rayshawn Jenkins, and Cisco, those are the types of players we want because they're pretty athletic. So I want to see one of these get taken to the house. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that would be fun. And I think to your point, Jacob, about forcing takeaways versus fundamentals, these defenders, obviously they know the risk reward of taking certain angles, right? And you'll see it every game you watch of, oh my God, that like the defender almost got his hand on it. Like he took a sharp angle and he almost got it, versus just taking, letting them catch the 4-yard pass, but then making the tackle, but then you go for the pick and you overrun it. And then it turns into a 20-yard gain.
Well, I was going to say, if you think about what you just said, the 2 picks by Cisco and Rayshawn Jenkins were, they were off the defender. There was already someone defending those players, and they came up out of, the
coverage,
safety help, to come over and get those picks. So it wasn't a defender on those players potentially getting out of position to try to make a play. It was like the help coming in, being aggressive to make those plays. So it was almost the kind of way you want to see it, and the defender not, risking anything too crazy.
And I will say all 3 of the interceptions on Sundays, in my opinion, started up front with the pass rush. The first one, Travon Walker stunted inside and got his hand in Matt Ryan's face, threw a duck to Rayshawn Jenkins. The next pick, I think, was to Devin Lloyd, and it was tipped by, I think it was Fadukasi, tipped it at the line, just fell right into Devin Lloyd's hands. And then the last pick, pocket collapsing, he just threw another duck up in the air, and Cisco got the pick. So you talked earlier about the pass rush kind of helping, the secondary and just the people on the back end. That's what you're going to get. 3 picks. If you can get pressure up front, you're going to get those mistakes made, especially when it's a quarterback like Matt Ryan, who maybe, his best days are behind him as far as making plays happen.
I also felt like Matt Ryan was just targeting one receiver, and he was just going to go for it regardless. And I think that kind of helped the defense see that he wasn't moving his eyes around, trying to look for any open spots.
No, that's 100% accurate. It did feel like he was just very uncomfortable. Honestly, that's the way I felt. He just looked uncomfortable, happy feet the whole time. But the Jaguars defense leads the league in turnover differential at +5, which is crazy. They have 5 picks and 1 forced fumble, so they're second in the league in interceptions with 5. I think the Bills just surpassed them last night. I think the Bills have 6 now. They had like 4 picks of Ryan Tannehill last night, which was hilarious.
How many did the Eagles have last night? Jesus.
Yeah,
Darius Slay had like 4 or 5.
Yeah, Slay I think had 2 picks, but he dropped like 3 more. So Jags leading in turnover differential at +5, which credit to the defense, but also credit to Trevor Lawrence, like not turning the ball over. 1 interception on the year through 2 games. That averages out to 8 interceptions on the season. I'll take that. Looks good offensively and defensively when the turnover differential is as high as it is. So they're +5. And then let's get to Devin Lloyd real quick, because this is pretty crazy. Devin Lloyd, highest graded rookie in week 2, not just on the defense, not as a linebacker. He was the highest graded rookie according to Pro Football Focus in week 2 of the entire NFL. Props to, man. He's crazy. He had the second highest run defense grade out of all linebackers in week 2. And Rodrigo, hey there, Rodrigo from the Detroit Lions. Everyone remembers him from Hard Knocks.
Shout out Hard Knocks.
Yeah, was the only one ahead of him in first. So second highest run defense grade out of all linebackers in week 2. And Devin Lloyd currently leads all rookies in the NFL with 17 tackles. So wow. Definitely happy that, hashtag bulky masterclass, trade it back into the first round to draft Devin Lloyd. And it seems to be paying off well for the Jags, at least through 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, I was definitely impressed with him. I think I'm not making the comparison just yet because it's only been 2 games. But as me being a Ravens fan, he kind of looked like Ray Lewis a little bit. Just a little bit. Because, like I said, Ray Lewis is also everywhere on every play on defense. Devin Lloyd was kind of essentially the same way. I think Devin's much less physical, but, I mean, he's going to be on every play. And so I'm excited to see what he does throughout his time in Jacksonville just as a defensive player.
Yeah, what's crazy for me is I almost didn't really notice him that much, not in a bad way, but I feel like that was a good thing. It wasn't like he was missing plays or out of coverage. I kind of didn't realize how great of a game he was having, almost because it just, it looked like what should happen. So I'm glad to see that after kind of a little bit of a sluggish week 1, I would say, for Devin Lloyd, it looked like there was some, rust he was battling, but he looks great now. And now the first two picks, our 2 first-round picks, each have an interception this year. So that's pretty awesome.
And in total, 4 rookies in the NFL have an interception this year, and 2 of them are on the Jags. So through 2 weeks, only 2 rookies have picks, and Travon Walker and Devin Lloyd are half of it. So come on, Jags defense. You're looking good. We believe in you. To layer on top of that before we get to the Chargers game, top 5 Jags in week 2, according to Pro Football Focus. You had Shaq Griffin at number 5 at 77.7. Chris Manhertz at 81.2. I think a lot of that probably, I don't know specifically how these grades are graded out. I think it probably has something to do with the impact you make on a play and like what your assignment's supposed to be. So I'm assuming Chris Manhertz has a high grade for run blocking, pass blocking, and catching any balls that were thrown his way. But I was surprised to see that. And then Foye Oluokun at number 3 at 83.2. Devin Lloyd at number 2, 87.1. And then number 1, who do you guys think it is? Number 1 grade.
Trevor Lawrence.
I was going to say Christian Kirk.
Christian Kirk? No, it's Josh Allen at 91.4, which it's so funny because we haven't talked about him really all episode yet, but that just shows me that he's doing his job. Like whatever he's supposed to be doing, he's doing it.
He definitely is like showing, that he is that guy on that defensive line. Like he's making some plays. It's not always consistent plays, and I don't mean consistent as up and down. But sometimes he just comes out and makes one of the wildest plays you've ever seen, like, sniffs out a carry in the backfield 10 yards back or tackles Matt Ryan for a sack with one hand. He's just making these plays out of nowhere and really just leading the charge, I feel, setting a good example for Travon Walker and just like, being that dude that we always wanted him to be and people might be forgetting about. And I don't mean Jacksonville people. I just mean in the league. But we do have the best Josh Allen. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
The other Josh Allen looked great last night, though.
Yeah, he did. So we just
he looks so good. It's still amazing to me that the Jaguars beat the Bills last year. After what I've seen from the Bills, it just doesn't make sense that there's one game like every year that doesn't make sense. And the Jags beating the Bills last year is probably that game. But with that Titans loss to the Bills last night, 41-7, I'm sorry for anyone that watched it, including Matt. We watched it together
except
here.
Except for the Stephon Diggs owners.
Except for
that
the
was
Stephon
a great
Diggs.
game to watch.
Yeah.
He popped off last night, but the Jaguars are in first place in the AFC South. Let's just cherish this moment. I'm not sure how much longer we'll be able to say this, but the Jaguars are currently in third place in the AFC. They would be the number 3 seed in the AFC playoffs. It's not even October yet, and we're talking playoffs. Like, look at us.
So stupid.
Did you guys get the wallpaper? Yeah, for the Jags saying it's this time, and the Jags are in first place.
I should do that actually. Yeah, I should find that. They posted it.
Yeah, you can probably find it somewhere on Google or social media, but I thought it was pretty funny. So I put it's 9:04 and Jags are in first place. I was like, oh my gosh, take it all in.
Yeah, I mean, so Jags in first at 1-1, and then followed by the Texans at 0-1. They lost to the Broncos this past week. Obviously, the Colts in third at 0-1, losing to the Jags, tying with the Texans week 1. And then the Titans in last at 0-2, losing to the Giants week 1. And then the who'd they lose to again? Oh, yeah, the Bills last night. We were just talking about it. Last night, 41-7. So with that being said, let's look ahead. Let's get excited about being in first place. But 2 tough games coming up back-to-back. But none tougher probably than this one coming up. Jaguars at Chargers. 4:05 p.m. Jaguars going to the West Coast. We talk about streaks, talk about the Colts losing 8 in a row. Well, I'm pretty sure the Jaguars have lost 13 in a row going to the West Coast. Someone might have the exact number, but I can't remember the last time they won a game outside of the Eastern time zone. Oh, it was the Raiders game back in 2018, I think, was the last away win, when we closed down the Oakland Coliseum. You guys remember that?
I try not.
Remember that the
oh
Raiders
yeah.
The Raiders last game in Oakland. Huh?
I do. I mean, not like vaguely I remember, but usually it's like everything's a loss on the West Coast, so it's like kind of that should stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, so I
Um,
think that was our last one on the West Coast. So Jaguars at Chargers, 4:05 Eastern. The afternoon slate for us Jags fans. We're not used to that. So it's going to be a weird day for us, but we'll get adjusted properly. But gentlemen, how are we feeling about that game going into week 3 against the Chargers?
Well, before we really get into the X's and O's, I saw a pretty interesting tweet from a Doug Peterson interview, like press conference after practice, I think. Apparently, the Jags are actually supposed to be leaving for Los Angeles on Saturday, so like the day right before the game. They're not trying to get there earlier. They're not trying to get accustomed to anything. Doug Peterson, I don't know how much went into this. Said he was speaking with like different sleep scientists, and it's actually better for players to go as late as possible. So that way their body stays on East Coast time. You think they want to adjust, but I think that whole adjustment period probably will throw them off more. That is potentially one of the least um, involved like reasons why they will win or lose. I just thought it was interesting. If there is anything with that, maybe our coach thinks further than the X's and O's and how to give our players the best advantage to win. But when it comes to the X's and O's, we definitely have more to worry about, more star players, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. We don't know if he's going to be back. He's dealing with a hamstring. Those tend to linger. So I'm kind of like not too worried about him, even if he does come back, because that can be something he re-aggravates. I don't want him to, but I don't know how effective he'll be. Austin Eckler, he has yet to really do a whole lot on the ground. He's obviously a big passing threat. So we definitely just have a lot more players and like star players to worry about, which is the scary thing. So we just really got to be on our A game, and I think Doug Peterson needs to keep them on track, as I said earlier, for a really, really solid AFC team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a big test so far this week, early in the season. Like I said, Keenan Allen may be back, he may not, but Justin Herbert showed that he can go to guys that usually don't play, but they can catch. So we'll see how the Jags defensively adjust from week 2 to week 3, depending on who's available for the Chargers. And I say you got guys going out to the West Coast. So we'll see. I'm excited. Hopefully I'll be home in time to watch it. I don't know. I might be drunk around 4 o'clock on Sunday once baseball season's over. Don't quote me on that. But we'll see. I don't know, but it should be fun. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good game, and there's a few reasons why I'm nervous. I'm cautiously optimistic. I feel like we overuse that, but Austin Eckler, he has been held under 40 rushing yards each of the first 2 weeks. So it almost feels like, okay, this is the spot for him to pop off, like because everyone's expecting him to be a great running back. So is this the week for him to finally show up and pop off? Is this a good spot for him to finally be what fantasy football owners thought he was going to be and take over games? He's been splitting a lot of time with Sony Michel and Joshua Kelly there in Los Angeles. So I don't know what's happening with Austin Eckler. If Mike Williams is the only receiver, he showed what he could do in this game behind me against the Chiefs. He had like 9 catches, I think. He was just bodying up defenders. It looks like he's ready to break out as the number 1 guy, and I think he played that way against the Chiefs. So definitely toughest game up to this point in the season, but I think we were kind of pinpointing that going into the season. I just really hope that whatever happens in this game doesn't spoil the feeling that we have as Jags fans right now, as being optimistic and being excited and enthusiastic about this team. I hope no matter what happens, the Jaguars play well enough to where we can come away from the game thinking this team is still built for something special.
And I really think this game might be a great litmus test for our defense. The Commanders game, week 1, Carson Wentz had a great game, but that was week 1. We don't know how things come out of the gate. Week 2, we had a great defensive performance, but like I don't know if that shows how dominant our defense was or how maybe in trouble the Colts are. So we all know that Justin Herbert is a top quarterback in this league, top young quarterback. Mike Williams looks dominant. He should be taking over the number 1 spot. But if Keenan Allen's there too, great receiver as well. Austin Eckler, one of the top backs in the league when he gets going. So like I think this is going to show us is our defense, maybe not dominant like last week, but do they do the job to like force some turnovers Slow down Austin Eckler and make them throw. Maybe not make Michael Williams look like a god through like the first like 5 minutes of the game, like he did last week. And then on offense, I'm not too sure off the top of my head where the Chargers at as a defense, but on offense, I just hope to see the same methodical play calling and just like getting guys in the spots where they can make some plays and not try to do too much. If we can just stay in this game and compete, I think that'd be a win. But obviously, we want to win the game. The last thing I want to do is just have the Chargers blow us out. So as long as we can just keep it competitive, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm looking at their defense now, and Joey Bosa on the end, coming off the edge. Kyle Van Noy, who's obviously a quality player in the league, and then you have Khalil Mack, you have J.C. Jackson, who is a big signing.
Khalil Mack.
Yeah, Khalil Mack, J.C. Jackson coming over from the Patriots. Then you have Derwin James, and then you have Asante Samuel Jr.
When you name the players individually, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
When I think of the defense as a whole, and I'm looking at the numbers on paper and what they've allowed, I'm not as terrified. But Jesus.
And we saw what this team just did to the Chiefs last week. And again, like here on the Poojie podcast, we'll be as realistic as possible. I'm going to call it how I see it, but Chiefs won last week 27-24, but the Chargers defense looked legit, and our offense needs to be ready. Our offensive line specifically needs to be ready to show up in this game from what the Chargers did to you see behind me right there, Patrick Mahomes getting sacked. So it's going to be a long game, I feel like, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be a bad one. But so last year when we went in to play the Rams, it was like, oh God, this is going to be a bloodbath, and then it turned into the bloodbath. I kind of have a feeling that okay, we can maybe keep things competitive like we've been mentioning here. But if you guys had to give maybe one or two keys to the game as far as this game goes against the Chargers, where do we even begin? How do the Jaguars end with more points than the Chargers at 7:30 p.m. on Sunday?
I think just kind of go ahead, Justin. Go ahead.
No, you got it.
Oh, okay. I would just say, like I said, with the run defense, I think just kind of keep Herbert contained because he is a much more mobile quarterback. I think if you kind of keep him contained, also see if he can try and throw some bad passes, I think that'll be a huge effect. And then I'll say on the offensive side, I say just keep playing your game. It worked out this past week. Let's see if it works out this week. I'm playing a much faster defense. I would say just keep up with the tempo and see what goes from there.
Yeah, I think defensively, there's so many guys that they could have big games. Defensively, just try to avoid the big plays. Don't let anything crazy happen. They're gonna score on us. Just try to make them work for it as much as possible. We don't need anything wild, because once you let that happen and they start having these huge plays, it can get out of hand. And offensively, I think your best bet is to make sure Trevor feels comfortable, and that could be one, protecting him, but two, also putting him in situations where he can make quick decisions. Maybe they're little dump offs, maybe they're little short routes to get him going and not be like running for his life like we saw in week one. And then hopefully, like James Robinson's looked good. Travis Etienne's starting to look a little bit more comfortable in his second game going into his third. So I think for me, avoid those big plays on defense, and then on offense, just keep Trevor comfortable so he can do what he can to keep us in this game offensively.
Yeah, I think this is like the ultimate game of, okay, if you win the time possession, you can win the game. Because if you can keep the ball out of the Chargers' hands and limit their number of possessions, I think the Jaguars are going to be in a good spot to win the game, because that means they're having long extended drives like we saw in the game against the Colts in the first quarter, that 9-minute drive, 15 plays. So, win the time of possession battle, right? Limit the turnover battle, like whether it's even or come out on the plus side of it. That's always a good indicator. But then on the other end, I think Lawrence and the play calling needs to continue calling high percentage plays, high percentage passes, those little crossing routes to Kirk or Ingram. I think about this a lot with golf when I show up to a new golf course. Like, don't let the layout of a course dictate your style of play, because no matter what course you go play at, your skill set is still going to be the same. So when you're going to play a team like the Chargers, don't let the fact that you're playing the Chargers try and dictate the way you play football. Like you have to go in there and play what you're comfortable with. And it seems like what the Jags are comfortable with is those, 5 to 10 yard routes, those 5 to 10 yard completions, maybe a few attempts over the top, but just picking up first downs. 21 first downs this past week to 9 for the Colts. That was a huge victory for us. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I'd say honestly hold them to field goals, because I don't think there's a way to keep the Chargers from scoring. But if you can turn 3 touchdowns into 3 field goals, that's a difference in 12 points. So I say hold them to field goals. If you can keep them to 3 touchdowns and maybe 1 or 2 field goals, you're looking at a game that you could try and win 28-27. But it's going to be tough. Like regardless, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I just don't know if even letting up 3 touchdowns and a field goal will be enough, like against that defense you mentioned.
Yeah.
But it might be what has to happen is hopefully Justin Herbert's a good quarterback. So I'm hoping he sees some things and he takes some chances because he knows he's a good quarterback. And we just have, some of those turnovers show up for us, because I feel that's the turnover differential is usually what helps teams win. If you win the turnover battle, you usually tend to win the game. Unless you're just downright awful. And I don't think we're downright awful anymore, but we're still like taking those steps to being competitive.
And I will say this, if the Jaguars won this past week, if they won like 28-27, right? And it was like a win and it was exciting, like that's great. But I feel more motivated about this game, or more, I guess, more optimistic because of that 0, because of how the defense played, because I think that's something that the defense can keep together. And like that's chemistry, that's form. That's, knowing who your teammates are. That 24-0 score is just so inspiring to me because of how they attacked the quarterback, because of how the defense was flying around the field, how they kept Jonathan Taylor in check, like those types of things. If it wasn't for the defensive performance we saw in week 2, I don't know if I would even be hopeful at all for week 3. But
Correct.
I'm hopeful because of that defensive performance. Let's get to some score predictions for this one, Jaguars versus Chargers, unless anything else on the game before we move on. Anything from you guys? Is Herbert even going to play? Like, is that – we just talked about Herbert. I talked about Michael Pittman a lot last week, and he didn't even end up playing. So I want to know if Herbert's even playing. Do we have any injury
I
report?
think he's day-to-day right now, from what I
I
was
imagine
reading
he's
earlier. I would imagine so, too. He's got that dog in him, too.
Yeah, I mean, he came back in that game and drove him down for a touchdown to set up an onside kick. So we'll see what happens. But let's just assume that he will play. And I like how all the pundits were like, oh, well, maybe they just sit Herbert next week because they're playing Jacksonville. You assholes. Jacksonville's back. We are not a team that you can sit your star quarterback against. Matt, let's start with you. Jacksonville to LA, 4:00 window versus the Chargers. Score prediction from you, sir.
I mean, I would love to see him win. I'm not going to get too ahead of myself. I'm going to go 27-21 Chargers.
All right, 27-21 Chargers. Jacob, what about you?
Yeah, I was just trying to think of some things in my head right now, and I picked the same Chargers score. I think the Chargers will probably win this game. I'm going to hope for the Jags to win. Obviously, I went 27-23 Chargers.
All right, and I'm going to go 31-20 Chargers in this one. I think the Jaguars in the first half might keep it close, maybe like a 14-10 game or 13-10 game. But I think the Chargers are too talented and too skilled, especially, I mean, the Chargers that are that type of team that they win games they're supposed to win, right? Like that's the main thing. The Browns just lost to the Jets, right? So there's a big difference in the Browns and the Chargers. I think there's a big stigma in the NFL about, great teams and then losing to bad teams. Well, were they great to begin with? I do think the Chargers are a great team, and I do think they're the type of team that will just win games they're supposed to win and maybe eke out a few close wins against teams that maybe they were supposed to lose to, like the Chiefs. They almost won that game. I'm going to go 31-20 in this one. I do think 4 touchdowns and a field goal for the Chargers is pretty realistic. It gets away from the Jaguars in the second half, but I don't think it's an embarrassing performance. I think it's an inspired performance. I think the team uses this game to kind of come together as, like you said, Jacob, a litmus test. Let's see what they're built up for the rest of the year. And they have the Philadelphia Eagles coming up next week. So it doesn't get any easier after this game. for the Jaguars. But let's look elsewhere around the NFL real quick. Quick 5 to 10 minutes on this for you guys. Just know the listeners like the NFL talk, but guys, what are we buying in the NFL after week 2? From all around the NFL, you can pick anything you like, whether it's a team, a player, anything specific. What are we buying week 2 or after week 2 in the NFL?
Eagles are Super Bowl contenders. That's what we just saw last night. Jalen Hurts looked very good. Defense did a good job getting it to Kirk Cousins. Justin Jefferson only had, I think, 1 catch the entire game. Darius Slay had a great game plan according to him, but I think there's something to be excited about as an Eagles fan. Obviously, they had the Super Bowl run 2017, 2018. I think you should be just excited about this year, man. So I definitely see Eagles as a huge Super Bowl contender. I'm sure our other roommate, Devil Walker, would definitely love me hearing that.
Yeah, you just said it to make him feel good.
Well, no, but it's
I'm
also
kidding,
true,
I'm
though.
I actually think another team that's pretty solid, surprisingly, is the Detroit Lions. That Eagles team that you just hyped up, they had a close game against that Eagles team. With 38-35, I think. I remember I just saw all Devin's tweets like, bruh, how are we up 17 on this Lions team and they're coming back? And they had a pretty strong win against the Commanders. I think the Commanders kind of came back a little bit. But, I mean, DeAndre Swift, he's balling out. Amon-Ra St. Brown, is that his name? Did I mess that up?
Mm-hmm.
It just sounds weird when I say it out loud.
Yeah.
But, his performance this last week was really solid. The Detroit Lions, might actually be a pretty solid team, and they might not be garbage like us anymore. So I think I'm buying them actually being good and competitive throughout the year. Don't know what that turns into in terms of a record, but they might not be a slouch like they've been in the past.
Love that. And first time since like 2009 or something that the Jaguars, Jets, and Lions all won on the same day, or Jaguars, Giants, Jets, and Lions all won on the same day. Something crazy like that. So you're talking about bad teams like the Lions turning it around. Maybe this is the year that we reverse the garbage disposal and all these bad teams from years past come through all at once, and teams like the Titans are 0-2, and teams like the Raiders are 0-2, and teams like the Cardinals are 1-1, and the Bengals are 0-2, and the Cowboys suck. But then all these other teams are coming through the garbage disposal in the other direction. I'm going to go with this, and Matt, I'm sorry about this. I think the Dolphins are legit, and I almost say that as a Matt's done with me. No, if he still had the headphone on, I say that as a compliment to the Baltimore Ravens because
you had to hurt me there. You had to hurt me there.
No, I think the Ravens are a good enough team to where the fact that the Dolphins beat the Ravens, that's a pretty high check mark in my book. So I think the Ravens are a great team, and I think the Dolphins showing out in week 1 like they did against the Patriots, showing a lot of resolve against the Ravens in week 2. I won't go into details, but winning that game, they're 2-0 at the top of the division. Obviously, I think the Bills are still the team to beat in the AFC East, but I am going to say I think the Dolphins are a legitimate team in the NFL this year, and Mike McDaniels knows what he's doing. Is it McDaniel or McDaniels?
Is it McDaniels?
I don't even know.
I think that's yes. I think
Mike McDaniel or McDaniels. But I'm gonna go with the Dolphins. All right, guys. And what are we selling after week 2? Get that shit out of here. What are we getting rid of? What are we not buying? What are we selling in week 2? Matt, we'll start with you if you want to go.
Just scrolling through the fact that the Giants are 2-0. But I just think they just played 2 terrible teams. I think the Titans just showed last night they're not going to be a good team. But it's still early. And then they play the Panthers, who, my God, the Panthers have to get a Matt Rule. They have to get rid of him. He's lost 9 straight games. Panthers fans are livid. I saw a tweet yesterday where it said, if you're a Panthers fan, you're entitled to compensation with the amount of stuff they've had to deal with the last 2 years. So I'm not – yeah, the Giants are 2-0, but I'm not buying that it's going to keep going. I just don't think Daniel Jones is a good quarterback. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Jacob,
I completely agree. I wanted to say the same thing, but the problem is I think they play the Cowboys coming up, And the Cowboys, showed a little bit more life this last week, but I feel like overall we're not seeing a strong Cowboys team. So like, who knows? Maybe they steal a game from the Cowboys, then they go on to play the Bears. So the Bears looked, a bit better, but I mean, it's still like not
They're
a very
beatable.
scary team. So it's like, who knows if they end up 3-1, 4-0. I didn't want to put my foot in my mouth saying that I sell the Giants, but it's just like there's no way it feels like the Giants could be a solid 2-0 team. It's probably one of the, the 2-0 teams of the undefeated teams. That's probably the one you want to sell, right?
It's
I
it's like
I completely agree with Matt.
it's like with the Broncos last year, were 3-0, and people are hyping up them.
I'm
And
sorry,
look what
Richie,
happened
if you
after
watch
that.
this. I don't know if you do, but
But it's a good story. Them 2-0
yeah,
and the Jets are 1-1. Like New York is on fire right now.
there were some fine old boys playing some football, and it's a good story.
Yeah, it's
We'll
a good
laugh.
story. I'm selling Kirk Cousins. I'm officially done with Kirk Cousins. I think he is a bottom 5 quarterback in the league. Last night,
Ooh,
what I saw from him
bottom
against
five.
the Eagles in prime time, your team has a prime time game. And let's not get it twisted. Minnesota is not a big market. They don't have the primetime game because it's a big market like Dallas or like New York. They have the primetime game because the schedule makers think that the Vikings are legit, and I'm going extremely against that. Last week, I thought that the Packers were done being kings of the NFC North. I thought the Vikings might take the reins from them. But from what I saw last night, the Vikings are going to be lucky to crack 500 if Kirk Cousins plays like that at all the rest of this season. I mean, he was terrible. Primetime Kirk, he's 2-11 in primetime games against the spread, that is. I think his record's even worse. I think it's like 1-13. But Kirk Cousins, I'm selling you. Vikings, I'm selling you. Justin Jefferson was on clamps yesterday, as Devin said, against Darius Slay. Dalvin Cook looked like his brother back. James Cook should have been on the bench the whole first half, come back in the second half when the team was already winning. It just was not a good look for the Vikings. So that's what I'm selling. And there's a few other things I want to sell, but I'll save that just to see how it plays out for the rest of the season. One's within our division, and then one's within the NFC. But I'll leave that for next week. Let's get to it. Best game of week 3. Best game of week 3 in y'all's opinion. Coming up here in just a few short days. Thursday night football all the way through Monday night. What's the best game of the week?
I don't know if y'all looked at the schedule yet, but to me, there's an obvious choice. It's the Bills and the Dolphins.
Yeah,
The Bills are
looking at
going
that
to
too.
Miami, and we just saw, once again, condolences to Matt about that loss. But the Dolphins came back, and Tua had 469 yards, 6 touchdowns. If you play fantasy football, both Tyreek and Jalen Waddle had 30-plus points. That was some big time game for what people were like worried about Tua being able to throw deep enough for Tyreek. I think it's working out just fine. So I don't know if that is going to translate against the Bills defense, but it would be it sure would be a lot of fun to see Bills Dolphins shootout. Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle, like all these guys, and hopefully Gabe Davis is back. I don't really know where he's at on his injury, but I think that's easily the best game. It's an AFC East matchup. I don't know if you can pick a better one. Try me.
No,
Try him, Matt.
I'm
Matt.
not even going to. I mean, I completely agree with what he says.
I think it's obvious.
Yeah, and I think what helps the Dolphins is that this game is in Miami. They're a 5.5-point underdog in this one. Yeah, we'll see if the Dolphins are legit after what they did in the fourth quarter against the Ravens last week, and then going up against probably, I think, arguably to say the best team in the NFL right now. So we'll see what the hype's all about.
Yeah, I'll echo that, but just to play the contrarian role, Packers Bucks is going to be a fun one, rematch of like the NFC Championship from 2 years ago, and it's Rodgers versus Brady's, and I'm beating the drum, blah blah blah. Like everyone's going to talk about that this week. So, Bucks Packers, but my sneaky best game of the week is going to be Rams Cardinals. After the Cardinals came back to beat the Raiders in the fourth quarter. I'm excited to see these two teams match up because these are two of the favorites in their division, along with the 49ers. Both these teams have playoff aspirations this season. So I think that's going to be a really fun game to watch. The Rams travel to Arizona for that one, and it looks like the Rams are 3.5-point favorites in that one against the Cardinals. Real quick, guys, what do you guess? Packers, Bucks. What do you think the line is there without looking?
The line.
I would say.
What do you think
I
the
would
spread
s-
is?
I would
Where's the
say
game you
Bucks
said?
minus.
It's Packers in Tampa.
I would say Bucks -3.
Okay, Jacob.
Maybe Bucks 4.5.
Bucks 1.5.
1.5. Man, I almost wanted to go down, but I was scared
Wow.
to.
Wow.
1.5. Like that's absurd to me from what we've seen from the Bucks defensively this year and what they've done just shutting down opposing teams. Like it's been child's play for them. But I guess the bookmakers saw something special in Aaron Rodgers last week to think that they have something to prove against the Bucks. So 1.5 point spread there. All right, guys. Best storyline of week 3, if we can think of any. If you guys have one in mind, best storyline of week 3.
Ooh.
I'll start. I'll start best storyline.
Okay.
Jimmy Garoppolo returning to the helm for the 49ers.
Dang.
Could this be the end of Trey Lance as we know it as a 49er? It seems like he's out for his career. No, for the season. I'm kidding. But could this be the turning point for Jimmy G where the 49ers are just like, okay, we can't go away from this guy again? Like, he's taken us to the conference championship. He wins us games. The dude is just a winner, and he might not be the greatest player, the greatest quarterback, the greatest winner, but I think that'll be my best storyline, and I think we get that on Sunday Night Football, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 49ers at Broncos. So the return of Jimmy G as the starter for the San Francisco 49ers. Any other good storylines from you guys?
Does it have to be good? Could be bad.
No, just any storyline.
What did you have something, Matt?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards 2 games as storylines. I don't know if I can share 2 if that's acceptable to you, Justin.
Yeah, go for it.
So one storyline is as much as I love this quarterback, he could be sitting on the bench, but Kenny Pickett may be starting this week.
I would
Thursday
love
Night
that.
Football against the Browns. We'll see if that happens against probably a cursed Cleveland Browns team. Tough week for them last week. And my other one is going to be the Bengals continue with the Super Bowl hangover, and they're going to lose on the road to the Jets for the second year in a row, even though they are 4.5
You're
point
predicting that
favorites.
they'll lose.
I'm predicting they'll lose. I'm predicting they'll lose. We'll see. Joe Flacco's still elite.
Joe Flacco's elite.
Gets that loss, and he's coming out for blood now. Yeah, I asked about if it had to be good because something I kind of want to mention earlier. Just thoughts on week 2. Are the Broncos bad? Like, we had this pretty solid defense. We took, Russell Wilson. We got him there. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, and they struggled against the Texans just this week. They lost to the Seahawks. You would think, I know that was in Seattle. You'd think Russ would cook against his former team, but instead he lost to, his old team. What was it? Geno Smith was starting?
Yeah.
Right?
Brought him back.
Russell Wilson, let's ride to where? What are you talking about? I was so upset that we weren't putting away the Texans because I want the Jags to be the number 1 team in the division, and it was a struggle. It was a last-minute touchdown to even put the Texans away. And I do not think the Texans are good by any means. Now they play the 49ers, so that kind of goes with your storyline of Jimmy G. I feel like the 49ers will take care of business, but what's going on with Russell Wilson and the Broncos?
I wonder, Justin, if Russell's now still climbing up in your rankings as the biggest phony after now Russell Wilson is doing winning videos as what Tom Brady does. That was very cringy when I saw Russ do that. And I was like, are you kidding me?
Thank you for reporting that to the phony commissioner because I might have to add a few points on the phony scoreboard.
I think you have to.
The phony scoreboard on Twitter, just one of the best gimmicks going around. Some of the other good storylines, we hit a ton of them. But another good one, Detroit Lions at the Minnesota Vikings. There's a realistic chance after Sunday, after week 3, that the Lions are leading the NFC North at 2-1. It would all come down to if the Bears can beat the Texans, But assuming the Bucs beat the Packers, Packers move to 1-2, Vikings move to 1-2, Lions are 2-1, and then the Bears would either be 2-1 or 1-2. There's a good chance the Lions could be feeling how Jags fans are feeling right now after what we just saw from the Minnesota Vikings yesterday on Monday Night Football. From what we've seen from the Lions, I would be buying the Lions and selling the Vikings in that game. So that's a good storyline. You also have the Raiders meeting the Titans, both teams 0-2. Dare I say it? Whoever loses that is out of the playoffs. Like, is it too early to say that? One of these teams is starting 0-3, and there's a good chance that 0-3 doesn't get you into the playoffs, or that you're not able to battle back from 0-3 in that game. So, like I said, tons of good storylines there. But let's get to lock of week 3. If you guys have looked at the spreads or the money lines or whatever, just your lock of week 3, number 1 team you're going with to guarantee a victory this week.
I think Kansas City.
I was going to say it, Matt.
Kansas
It's not worth your time.
Yeah.
It's like it's.
6.5-point favorites. Colts have looked terrible these first 2 weeks. I just can't see
14-point favorites. Get these college lines out here.
Yeah, right. The
There's
college
no
lines
way we're really thinking it's going to be a 6.5-point spread between what the Jags demolished the Colts. Kansas City and the Patrick Mahomes are definitely legit. And you're telling me 6.5 points.
Well, the Browns were 6.5-point favorites over the Jets. They were up 13 with 1:30 left and found a way to lose by 1. Yeah. So, also the Rams were 10-point favorites. They were up by 17 and they won by 4, or they were up 20 and they won by 4. Something crazy. So you never know. It could happen. I mean, that's a very, 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 very good lock there. If I had to go with a lock that wasn't that one, I would probably go with the, honestly, Chargers over the Jags. I'll just say it. I'll be that guy. But that would be another lock for me. But then let's get to it, since there's obviously only like one lock of the week. Upset special in week 3. Anything from you guys for the upset special?
If you would have given me just 2 seconds, I was going to make both my lock and my upset special of the week the same game, and that's going to be the Lions over the Vikings. I don't care if they open up as 7.5-point underdogs going to Minnesota. That team looks good. Minnesota does not. And I know we got star power in Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, but you mentioned how, we're not getting much out of Kirk Cousins. I don't know. To me, just based on just like gut feeling, I think the Lions win that game against the Vikings, and what you were mentioning about them taking over at the top spot happens. I'm going to go out on a limb. It's probably not the most reasonable, but I'm going to make that my lock of the week and my upset special of the week.
Ooh. I love that.
Because guess what? There's not really much flag if I get it wrong.
Jacob's ready to eat some kneecaps. That's
maybe I should put some money on the game and put my money where my mouth is, right?
Yeah.
I like that.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, upset. I like the Lions. Dan Campbell, he's doing great things up there right now. I think they're showing signs. They got the offense to win games. So we just saw that Minnesota just didn't look like the team they should be. So yeah, I'd say Detroit over Minnesota.
That's a great upset special. That's the one I had in mind, but I'll just throw this one out there. Houston over Chicago. Chicago 3.5-point favorites. Houston's played both the Colts and the Broncos very closely. Are the Broncos and Colts good or bad? What does that say about the Houston Texans? But they're going up against the Chicago Bears team that just put up 10 points against the Packers, who allowed 23 points in week 1 against the Lions or against the Vikings. So what are we going to see there? I would say Texans over the Bears, upset special. But the upset lock, it's got to be Lions over the Vikings. That's beautiful. And it's a 6.5-point, or it's a 6-point spread right now for the Vikings. So maybe do a teaser there, like tease the Lions to +12 and the Chiefs down to a 0.5 point, and then boom, you win. All right, winless teams. Who's in trouble and who's not? I'll read you the winless teams. You got the Titans, the Raiders, the Falcons, the Colts, the Bengals, the Texans, and the Panthers. Who's in trouble, who's not? We don't need to hit all these teams, obviously, but one or two teams that's, one in trouble, one that's not in trouble.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, Titans, Raiders,
Gotcha.
Falcons, Colts,
Gotcha.
Bengals, Texans, and Panthers.
Gotcha. Dang, they're all in trouble. I think. What do you say, Matt?
I was gonna say that I think the one team. There's two teams in mind. I think they're only two that are in trouble, and that's the Tennessee Titans. They have the team that should be winning games, and they're not. I think it shows that the Titans should go after Malik Willis as their starter. And another one I say is the Panthers. If they go 0-3, I think you have to cut ties with Matt Rule, and officially just move on.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to go with the Raiders. I think they're in trouble because of the division they're in. It's that simple. Like, they've lost 2 games now, and they still have all their divisional games ahead of them. So they still have to play the Broncos and the Chiefs and they played the Chargers once, but they still have all those divisional games, which you can probably chalk up 3 or 4 more losses. And they have the Titans this week. I think they're the most in trouble out of these winless teams. Jacob, winless teams for you?
I want to say the one that I think is not as in much trouble, and I don't really know what I'm basing this off of other than just like talent is the Bengals. I mean, they're obviously in trouble because they're 0-2. But I mean, in their division, we have, the Steelers who, Najee hasn't been looking like hyper effective. Deontay Johnson's been all right. I mean, they're, like you mentioned, Matt, like they might be starting Kenny Pickett. I'm not worried about Mitch Trubisky. There's obviously the Ravens, who I'm going to respect. I'm not going to get too touchy there, Matt. Don't worry. And then the Browns, I mean, they just lost to the Jets in bad fashion. They have a great run game. Not really worried about their quarterback. And there's a lot of talent on the Bengals. I mean, Joe Burrow, he's not getting help from his offensive line, but we're talking about Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. The defense is pretty solid. Like, I imagine they turn things around. Does it turn into a deep run toward the playoffs and a playoff appearance and a deep playoff run? I don't really know. But of all those teams, that's definitely the most talented team to turn things back around, especially within the division as the way it sets right now.
Yeah, I would want to go back and look at the history books here of Super Bowl appearance teams from either conference that start the next year 0-2, because this is pretty like out of the norm for me, at least, seeing a Super Bowl team start 0-2. Let's get into undefeated teams real quick. We got 6 of them. Best team out of all the undefeateds. You got the Dolphins, Eagles, Chiefs, Giants, Bills, Bucks. I think all 3 of us can confirm that we agree that the Giants are the worst out of all the undefeated teams. But the best undefeated team going, can we all confirm on 3? We say the team we think's the best?
Yes, on 3. Let's go.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Bills.
Bills. Okay. All right. Next segment.
And that's the show.
That's the show.
Thanks for being here. But no, the AFC, I think, is the far and away better conference this year. And that just starts with the Chiefs and the Bills being, I think, the 2 best teams. But the Eagles, what we saw from them last night, they are a very dangerous, undefeated team. Jalen Hurts looks like him, or whatever they're saying these days. I am him, or whatever. Jalen Hurts looks like a legit quarterback 1. A.J. Brown, legit wide receiver 1. Miles Sanders, the running game. Boston Scott got involved. It was really good to see what the Eagles were able to do last night. So my under the radar 2-0 team right now would be the Eagles, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else from you guys?
No, I think we're good for this week.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time away to do this. Those out there listening, thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. Go find us on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever. But thank you again for being here. Subscribe, like, comment, all that. Go enjoy some college football this week. Go enjoy some NFL action on Sunday. But whatever you do, go make this world a better place and take care. Thanks.